Big, slow farmers like you don't get second chances. You get pushed out. The biker leaned in close to Elijah Boone, his voice loud enough to carry across the open field, daring anyone to step in. His partner laughed beside him, cracking his knuckles. Whole county knows you two are finished. Land like this doesn't stay in your hands long. The engines behind them idled low, a steady growl pressing in from the road. Elijah shifted his stance just slightly. Weight balanced, feet planted with quiet precision that didn't match the image they saw. Isaiah rolled his shoulders once, slow and controlled, his breathing steady, eyes locked forward like he was measuring distance and timing. The men saw hesitation, weakness, something easy to break. They had no idea they were standing face to face with two men trained to stay calm long before a fight ever begins. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The note trembled in Elijah's weathered hand. Sell or burn. 3 words scrawled in red marker that stank of threat. The severed hog's head at his feet leaked dark fluid onto the porch boards his grandfather had laid 50 years ago. They crossed a line tonight, Isaiah said, his voice low and dangerous. In the moonlight, his broad shoulders looked like a mountain ready to move. This ain't harassment no more. This is war. Elijah folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his pocket. Evidence. Every piece mattered now. Get the camera, brother. Document everything before we clean it up. Naomi stepped through the screen door, stopped cold at the sight. Oh, my God! Her hand flew to her mouth. That's a message, Elijah said, his calm voice masking the rage building in his chest. And we're gonna answer it. Just not how they think. Loretta appeared behind Naomi, her eyes narrowing at the bloody trophy. She didn't flinch. At 63, Loretta Boone had seen too much ugliness to be shocked by a dead animal. They used our own livestock against us. That hog came from our pen. Isaiah's fists clenched. That means they were on the property earlier, walking around like they owned the place. The fence cutting wasn't random either, Elijah said, limping down the porch steps, his old knee injury aching with each movement. They cut at the north corner. That's where the property line meets Rooker's development land. Naomi returned with her phone, taking photos of everything. The head, the bloodstains, the note Elijah handed back to her. Sheriff Hensley needs to see this. This is criminal trespassing, destruction of property, and intimidation. Loretta made a sound between a laugh and a curse. Sheriff won't do a thing. Did you see him at the auction? Standing there with that smirk while Rex pushed Isaiah around? She shook her head. Law ain't on our side, baby. Law might not be, Elijah said quietly, but we still document everything. Build the case. They think we can't build. Isaiah stalked off the porch, grabbing a shovel from beside the barn door. He returned and scooped up the hog's head, his face a mask of controlled fury. I'm gonna bury this ugly thing, then check on the cattle. That branded cow needs treatment. I'll call Dr. Williams, Naomi said, already dialing. We need photos of the brand before it heals. Elijah nodded, watching his twin march away with the grisly burden. Isaiah was the heart, always had been. Quick to love, quick to anger. Elijah was the head, the planner, the one who'd kept them both alive in Fallujah when everything went to hell. What are you thinking? Loretta asked, studying her brother's face. I'm thinking they'll be back, Elijah said simply. Tonight was just the opener. He walked to his truck, opened the lockbox behind the seat, and pulled out an old notebook, the one from his service days. Diagrams, defensive positions, line-of-sight markers. He'd mapped the farm years ago, just in case. People thought the limp made him weak. They didn't understand how a man who'd learned to fight through pain became something else entirely. "You're not thinking of calling the police, are you?" Loretta followed him, voice tight with concern. "No. I'm thinking we need to be ready." Elijah flipped through pages of neat, precise drawings. "Rex and his boys, they think we're just fat old farmers. They haven't figured out what we really are." Back on the porch, Naomi hung up the phone. "Dr. Williams can't come until morning." He sounded scared. "Everyone's scared of Rooker," Loretta said bitterly. "Man's got half the county in his pocket." Elijah closed the notebook. "Fear's got a short shelf life when it meets something worse." "And what's worse than fear?" Naomi asked. "Us," Isaiah answered, returning from burying the head. Dirt stained his massive hands. "When we stop holding back." The four Boones stood in the moonlight, the violated farm stretching around them like a battlefield waiting to happen. Somewhere in the darkness, a cow bellowed in pain from the brand burned into its hide. The sound hung in the air, an accusation. "Get some sleep," Elijah told them. "I'll take first watch." But no one moved toward the house. They all knew sleep wouldn't come tonight. Not with the smell of threat so fresh, not with the boundary lines crossed, not with war declared on Boone land. Minutes after finding the threat, Elijah, Isaiah, Naomi, and Loretta stood under the lone porch light. The yellow glow barely reached the yard, casting long shadows across the worn boards. Blood from the severed hog head had pooled near the steps, thick and dark against the weathered wood. "We need to call Sheriff Hensley," Naomi insisted, gripping her phone. "This is criminal intimidation, trespassing, animal cruelty." Loretta shook her head firmly. "That man's not coming out here to help us. He's Rooker's dog. Always has been." "Then I'll call state police," Naomi countered. "And they'll kick it back to local jurisdiction," Loretta said. "By the time anyone shows up, evidence will be gone and they'll write it up as kids playing pranks." The night air carried a new sound, motorcycle engines rumbling in the distance, the noise rising and falling as it moved around the property line. "They're still out there," Isaiah growled, "circling like vultures." Elijah's face remained impassive as he limped across the porch. "Naomi, go get the camera. Document everything, the fence cuts, the branded cow, this mess. Loretta, check the emergency radio, make sure it's charged. Isaiah, with me." "Where are we going?" Isaiah asked, already moving. "Barn first, then perimeter check." Naomi hesitated. "What should I do after the photos?" Elijah paused. "Get the shotgun from the cabinet, load it with rock salt rounds." "Rock salt? Won't kill, but they'll feel it." Elijah's voice was matter-of-fact. "Just in case." The brothers moved across the yard, two massive shadows against the moonlight. Despite his limp, Elijah moved with quiet precision, each step placed exactly where it needed to be. Isaiah matched his twins' pace instinctively, the way they'd done since childhood. The distant engines faded, then disappeared completely. The silence felt worse somehow. By 2 a.m., the farm had settled into an uneasy quiet. Loretta dozed in the kitchen chair while Naomi kept watch from the window. The brothers had finished their rounds and were checking the barn one last time. The first sign was the smell. Gasoline, sharp and chemical. Then came the flicker of light from behind the hay storage. "Down!" Elijah hissed, pulling Isaiah into the shadows. Two figures crept along the barn wall. One carried a gas can, the other a torch. Behind them, half hidden by darkness, stood a third man, broader, more confident in his stance. Rex Varlow, watching from the shadows. Elijah tapped Isaiah twice on the shoulder, their old signal. Without a word, he slipped away toward the circuit breaker mounted on the barn's exterior. The torch touched hay. Flames leapt up, hungry for fuel. The farm plunged into darkness. In the sudden blackness, the attackers froze, momentarily blind. Elijah had cut all power, but he and Isaiah knew every inch of this land, could navigate it blindfolded. Isaiah moved first, a mountain of silent fury. He caught the man with the gas can completely unaware, driving him backward into the steel gate that separated the equipment yard from the barn. The impact made a dull boom, followed by the man's scream as his arm caught between metal bars. Bone snapped with a wet crack. The gasoline splashed across the dirt. Harmless now. Across the yard, Elijah closed in on the second attacker. The man swung wildly with the torch, its flame revealing his panic. Elijah ducked under his arm, drove a fist into his kidney, then seized his head and slammed it down into the water trough. The torch hissed out in the water as Elijah held the man under, counting seconds before pulling him up, sputtering and broken-nosed. A precise chokehold, and the attacker slumped unconscious. Slow clapping echoed across the yard. Rex stepped forward, his face alternating between shadow and moonlight. "Well, well, you old boys got some fight left." His voice was casual, amused even. Elijah and Isaiah stood side by side, breathing steady, neither speaking. Rex's smile vanished. He lunged at Elijah with surprising speed, a knife appearing in his hand. The blade slashed through air as Elijah pivoted on his good leg, using Rex's momentum against him. Rex recovered quickly, wheeling around for another attack. Isaiah moved to help, but Elijah snapped, "Stay back!" Rex circled, knife low. "Thought you were just some fat old farmer." He feinted left, then struck right. Elijah blocked the blow with his forearm, wincing as the blade sliced skin. But in that same motion, he drove forward, delivering a crushing body blow to Rex's sternum. The gang leader staggered back, gasping. Before he could recover, Elijah's arm locked around his throat in a practiced chokehold. Rex thrashed, then jabbed backward with the knife. Elijah released him, stepping back just enough to avoid the blade. Breathing hard, Rex backed away into the darkness. His eyes never left the twins, burning with humiliation and rage. "You boys," he growled, "just made this personal." Just before dawn, the feed room smelled of sweat, blood, and fear. The two gang members sat on overturned buckets, zip-tied at wrists and ankles. Their faces showed a mix of pain and growing panic as reality set in. One nursed a clearly broken arm, the other's nose still leaked blood down his chin. Smoke from the quickly extinguished hay fire drifted lazily across the yard, catching the first hints of morning light. Naomi held her phone steady, recording everything. "State your name and why you came to our property tonight," she said, her voice calm but firm. The man with the broken nose spat on the ground. "Ain't saying anything." Isaiah stood by the door, arms crossed over his massive chest, still breathing hard from the fight. The adrenaline hadn't fully left his system. "You already said plenty when you were begging not to drown in that trough." Naomi zoomed in on their injuries. "You came to our property armed with gasoline and torches. You threatened our family. You damaged our property." She spoke each point clearly for the recording. "Who sent you?" The one with the broken arm whimpered, "Look, we didn't know, all right? Rex just said it was an easy job. Scare some old farmers." "Rex Varlow?" Naomi pressed. Yeah, him. My arm. You need a doctor? Isaiah asked, his voice deceptively gentle. Tell us everything. Maybe we'll call one. The man looked up, desperate. Rex never said. He never told us you guys were Marines. He would have brought more guys if he knew that. The room went quiet. Elijah, who had been silently watching from the corner, exchanged a look with his twin. How'd you know that? Isaiah asked. The man nodded toward Elijah's forearm, where an old tattoo was visible below his rolled-up sleeve. My uncle had the same one. 2 tours in Vietnam. Something shifted in the room's atmosphere. A brief, unspoken recognition across enemy lines. Naomi looked hopeful for the first time since the night began. This is exactly what we need. Sheriff Hensley can't ignore this. We've got proof, confessions, everything. Hensley's in Rooker's pocket, Loretta said from the doorway, her voice flat. Has been for years. He's still the law, Naomi insisted, and this is clear evidence of organized crime. The sound of tires on gravel silenced them. Through the feed room's small window, they saw an unfamiliar sedan pulling up beside the scorched hay storage. A woman stepped out, camera in hand, notebook tucked under her arm. She surveyed the damage, then turned toward the house. That's Tessa Wynne, Naomi said with surprise. From the Regional Tribune. How did she? Police scanner, Loretta guessed. Someone must have called in the fire. 10 minutes later, Tessa sat at their kitchen table, recording Loretta's account, while occasionally glancing out the window where the twins secured the property with quiet efficiency. These aren't isolated incidents, Tessa said, flipping through her notebook. I've tracked 3 suspicious barn fires in this county over the last year. All family farms, all followed by quick sales to shell companies. All black-owned? Loretta asked sharply. Tessa looked up. 2 out of 3. The third was an elderly widow. Vulnerable targets, Loretta nodded. People they think won't fight back. But your brothers did, Tessa observed, watching Isaiah check sightlines along the property edge. I noticed something about how they move. Military? Marines, Loretta confirmed. Both of them. 20 years ago. But some things stay with you. The crunch of tires announced another arrival. Sheriff Boyd Hensley's cruiser rolled to a stop, sunlight glinting off his badge as he stepped out, adjusting his hat unhurriedly. "Morning, folks," he called out, his politeness feeling like a slap. "Heard we had some excitement." The hope in Naomi's eyes began to fade as Hensley calmly dismantled everything. He reviewed the zip-tied men with a slight frown, as though the Boones had overreacted to a minor trespass. "These boys claim they got lost on county roads, took a wrong turn," he said, not even bothering to make the lie sound convincing. "Say you attacked them without warning." "That's not true." Naomi thrust her phone forward. "I have their confessions right here. They came to burn us out." Hensley took the phone, his smile never reaching his eyes. "I'll need this as evidence, of course. Department procedure." "You can't just—" Naomi started. "Miss Boone," Hensley cut her off. "I'd advise caution. Your father's used excessive force against trespassers. That's a legal problem." By noon, the attackers had been released without charges. Naomi's phone remained in evidence. Tessa had been politely but firmly escorted off the property by one of Hensley's deputies. But something else spread through town. The story of how the Boone twins, those quiet farmers everyone overlooked, had taken down armed intruders single-handed. How they moved like men who had done this before. The rumor took root. The Boones were ex-Marines. Rex heard it too, his humiliation turning to cold anger rather than fear. At 2 o'clock, A sleek black SUV pulled up to the farmhouse. Dale Rooker stepped out in pressed slacks and a button-down shirt, a manila envelope in his manicured hands. "Afternoon," he called, his voice friendly, reasonable. "I believe we should talk. I've reconsidered my offer, substantially." Late afternoon light slanted golden across the Boone farmhouse as Dale Rooker's SUV disappeared down the gravel driveway. The dust hadn't settled before Elijah closed the front door with a quiet click that somehow sounded final. His face gave nothing away, but his fingers stayed on the lock a moment too long. In the kitchen, Isaiah paced between sink and stove, his bulk making the worn floorboards creak. "Did you hear him? Just being practical. Like we're fools who don't understand money." Naomi sat at the table, her agricultural extension badge still clipped to her shirt. Double his first offer. He's desperate. And getting what he wants either way. Loretta stood by the window, watching Rooker's taillights vanish. Money or muscle, he doesn't care which. Elijah entered the kitchen. "Sit down, everyone." He didn't raise his voice, but they all obeyed. Some habits from childhood never died. Loretta looked at each of them, then nodded to herself. "Wait here." She disappeared into the pantry and returned with a rusted tin box pulled from behind rows of home-canned peaches. The metal was scratched and dented, the hinges stiff with age. The name Boone had been carved into the lid with a pocket knife. "Granddad's box," Isaiah whispered. Loretta set it on the table with reverence. "Been holding this since Daddy died. Time you all saw everything." Inside were yellowed papers wrapped in oilcloth, deed copies, tax receipts, handwritten letters, and faded photographs. Loretta spread them out carefully, pointing to dates that spanned decades. "This land has been fought for longer than any of us been alive," she said. These letters show 3 separate attempts to force Granddad to sell after he came back from Korea. False liens, damaged crops, threatening notes. Isaiah picked up a photo of their grandfather standing proudly before a much smaller farmhouse. "He never told us. He wanted you boys to grow up feeling safe," Loretta said, "but he kept records of everything." Elijah studied each document, his fingers gentle on the brittle papers. He paused at a hand-drawn map, unfolding it carefully. "Look at this." The map showed their property with markings that hadn't made sense decades ago. An abandoned rail spur to the north, county road access to the east, and a low riverbank crossing to the west, all converging beneath their acreage. "It's a corridor," Elijah said quietly. "A perfect transport route." Naomi leaned forward, agricultural training kicking in. The county's industrial zoning changed last year, with rail, road, and river access. Her eyes widened. "We're sitting on the only unbroken parcel connecting all 3. A knock at the back door made everyone freeze. Elijah moved first, opening it to reveal Tessa Wynne, notebook in hand, looking both determined and uneasy. "Sorry to intrude," she said, "but after what happened this morning, I did some digging." She glanced at the papers spread across the table. "Looks like you've been doing the same." Loretta nodded. "Come in, then." Tessa pulled out her laptop. "I traced property records for the surrounding 10 miles. In the past 18 months, 14 parcels have been purchased by what looked like different buyers." Her fingers tapped keys, bringing up a color-coded map. Every single one traces back to shell companies owned by Rooker Development. Isaiah stared at the screen. "He's boxing us in." "Creating a corridor," Elijah corrected, placing the old hand-drawn map beside Tessa's digital one. "The perfect route for whatever he's planning to move through here." Naomi looked sick. "And the sheriff's protecting him. not us. Rex and his gang aren't just random muscle, Elijah said, the final piece clicking into place. They're the enforcement arm of something bigger. This isn't about one farm. It's about completing a transport network. Then let's hit them first, Isaiah growled, his fist tightening. Tonight. Show them we're not— No. Elijah's voice was quiet but firm. The battlefield isn't just here on the ground. It's in the courts, in public records, on camera. We need to hold the farm and gather evidence that can't be buried. Loretta nodded. Naomi, can you get copies of those zoning changes? Tessa, will you help document this pattern? Both women nodded. We stay alert tonight, Elijah continued. No one sleeps alone. We record everything. As darkness fell, they cleaned up after a hasty supper. The mood somber but determined. Naomi was scrubbing the last plate when she froze, staring out the window. Lights, she whispered. At the tree line. They gathered at the window. Far down the property, near where their land met the county road, a string of headlights appeared through the trees. Motorcycles, moving slowly, deliberately. Rex, Isaiah muttered. Not hiding anymore, Elijah observed, his voice calm as he checked his watch. They want us to see them. The headlights moved in a slow circle, like wolves testing the perimeter, before disappearing back into the darkness. The Boone family sat around the kitchen table, forks scraping against plates as they ate in strained silence. Nobody mentioned the headlights they'd seen circling their property. They didn't have to. Through the open windows came the distant growl of motorcycle engines, revving and falling, a sound as deliberate as a finger tapping on glass. Tap, tap, tap. We're still here. Isaiah stabbed at his mashed potatoes. They think they can make us too scared to sleep. Naomi pushed food around her plate, appetite gone. It's working. Loretta reached over and squeezed her hand. We've faced worse. Not recently, Naomi said softly. The engines revved louder, as if responding to her doubt. Elijah set down his fork with quiet precision. Let's talk about tomorrow. His calm voice settled the room. And the day after that. And the day after that. He stood, grabbed a notepad from the counter, and began sketching the farm's layout. We're not running, and we're not waiting for more trouble. We're preparing, he pointed at Naomi. I need you to take all those photos from this morning, the notes, everything digital. Back them up on 2 separate flash drives, email copies to Tessa. Naomi nodded, some of the worry lifting from her face as she was given a clear task. Loretta, catalog everything in that tin box. Make copies where you can, but hide the originals in different places. If they come for one, they won't find them all. Already started, Loretta said. Elijah turned to his brother. Isaiah, we need to walk the property before dark. All of it. Isaiah pushed back from the table. Now we're talking. The brothers stepped out into the fading daylight, the distant motorcycles still growling beyond the trees. They moved methodically, starting at the main house and working outward. Elijah limped slightly, favoring his old knee injury, but his eyes missed nothing. Here, he said, pointing to the narrow lane between the equipment shed and the grain silo. Choke point. Anyone comes through, they're funneled right where we want them. Isaiah nodded, seeing it clearly. And that blind corner by the tractor shed, perfect for observation, Elijah finished. We'll run hose lines along the irrigation ditches. Gives us water for fires and creates mud traps if needed. The grain lot has the best elevated sight lines, Isaiah added. We can see the whole eastern approach from there. They continued mapping defensive positions, not as frightened old men, but as Marines who knew the land better than anyone could. Back at the house, Tessa was preparing to leave. "I'll start pulling records of fires, foreclosures, anything suspicious in the county records first thing tomorrow. If Rooker's been doing this to others, there'll be a pattern." "Be careful," Naomi warned. "Sheriff Hensley watches who asks questions." "I'm counting on it," Tessa said with a grim smile. As night fell completely, Naomi stood at the window, watching the neighboring farms. One by one, porch lights winked out across the valley. No signals of support, no offers of help, just darkness spreading house by house. "They're scared," she whispered. "With good reason," Loretta said, coming to stand beside her. "But fear is a choice." At 11:30, Elijah gathered them all. "We sleep in shifts tonight. 2 awake, 2 resting. Naomi and Loretta first, then Isaiah and me." Isaiah handed out walkie-talkies from the shed. "Batteries fresh. Keep them close." Just before midnight, Elijah took 4 hand-painted wooden signs from the workshop. In large black letters, each read, "No trespassing." He and Isaiah hammered them at the main entry points to the property. At the last post, where their gravel drive met the county road, Elijah paused. The motorcycle sounds had faded, but he knew they were still watching. He squared his shoulders and spoke clearly into the darkness, loud enough to carry, "We are not selling. We are defending." Isaiah stood shoulder to shoulder with his brother. "Damn right." They walked back to the house together, straight-backed and deliberate. The night was quiet now, almost peaceful. Inside, Naomi had made coffee for the first watch. Loretta was organizing papers at the kitchen table. "Anybody want?" Naomi began. The crack of a rifle shot shattered the kitchen window. Glass exploded inward. The bullet buried itself in the far wall, inches from Loretta's head. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Then Elijah's voice, unnervingly calm, "Everybody down, now." Glass shards glittered across the kitchen floor like deadly confetti. Naomi dropped behind the table, pulling it down as a shield. Loretta stood frozen by the stove, her eyes wide with shock. Isaiah was already moving, lunging toward the back door, rage pushing him forward. "Stop!" Elijah's command cut through the chaos. He grabbed his brother's arm, his grip iron. "Don't charge blind into darkness. That's what they want." Isaiah's chest heaved with each breath. "We can't just hide." "We're not hiding," Elijah said. "We're thinking." He pulled Isaiah away from the door. "Check on Loretta." Naomi crawled across the floor, avoiding the glass. "Aunt Loretta, are you hurt?" The older woman finally moved, pressing a hand to her chest. "Just startled. The bullet—" She pointed to the wall where the round had embedded itself, inches from where her head had been moments before. "They're not trying to kill us yet," Elijah said quietly. "Just scare us. Make us do something stupid." "Well, it's working," Loretta muttered, finding her voice again. "I'm plenty scared." Elijah moved through the house with purpose, pulling curtains, turning off lights. Everyone to the center hallway. No windows, thick walls. For the next several hours, they worked with quiet efficiency. Elijah pulled out an old floor plan of the farm and marked safe zones, escape routes, and danger areas. He divided the night into watch shifts, 2 hours each, rotating so everyone got some rest. "Isaiah, take the first round. Naomi, prepare those documents. Loretta, gather emergency supplies. I'll check the perimeter." Isaiah found chains in the tool shed and reinforced the gates, wrapping heavy links around the metal and securing them with padlocks. He repositioned the tractor and combine harvester, to block direct vehicle access to the house. The old feed truck became a barricade across the main drive. Inside, Naomi created digital folders on her laptop, carefully labeling each with dates and descriptions. Evidence Folder 1, Property Threats. Evidence Folder 2, Physical Attacks. Evidence Folder 3, Law Enforcement Negligence. She attached photos, copied documents, and wrote detailed accounts of everything that had happened. With each file complete, she sent encrypted copies to Tessa's work and personal emails. "They can break our windows," she whispered to herself. "They can't erase the truth." Loretta gathered first aid supplies, bottled water, and non-perishable food into plastic bins, placing them in the interior bathroom and hallway closet. Her hands shook, but her movements were precise. Dawn broke pale and tentative across the farm. The family gathered at the kitchen table, exhaustion carved into their faces. "We need to check for more damage," Elijah said. "Stay in pairs. Nobody goes alone." The morning light revealed the extent of the night's work. Naomi's county-issued truck sat with all 4 tires slashed, useless in the driveway. The feed bins for the cattle had been contaminated with motor oil, making the grain inedible. Across the milking shed, spray-painted in jagged red letters, "Dead Farm Walking." Naomi called Sheriff Hensley from the landline. His response was immediate and useless. "No one was hit, so no emergency response is needed," he said, his voice smoothly unconcerned. "File a vandalism report at the station if you want." "Someone fired a rifle into our home." Naomi's voice shook with fury. "Probably just kids. I'll send someone by when I can spare them." After hanging up, she slammed her fist against the wall. "He's not coming. He's never coming." By afternoon, Elijah and Isaiah were transforming the farm into a defensive position. They piled silage bales in strategic spots to create cover. Irrigation ditches became trenches, natural barriers against vehicles. The haylofts in the barn became observation posts with clear sight lines in all directions. Isaiah rigged farm bells to fence lines, simple trip alarms that would sound if someone tried crossing boundary points. Elijah mapped entry angles and blind spots, noting which approach routes were most vulnerable. Naomi watched her father and uncle work, seeing their movements with new eyes. This wasn't paranoia. This was training. This was experience. This was survival. "You're turning our farm into a fortress," she said when they came in for water. Elijah wiped sweat from his brow. "We're using what we have. The land is our advantage. We know every inch." "They think they're hunting farmers," Isaiah added, "but they've never fought men who can read terrain." As evening approached, shadows lengthened across the fields. Elijah stood on the porch, binoculars scanning the perimeter. Isaiah joined him, passing over a canteen of water. "Movement by the road?" Isaiah asked. "No, something else." The buzzing came before they spotted it. A small drone hovering above the soybean field, its camera pointed directly at the farm. It hovered, recording everything, sending images back to unseen watchers. "They're studying us," Elijah said flatly. "Learning our layout," Isaiah agreed. The drone maintained its position, a mechanical eye in the darkening sky, watching the farm from above. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the boarded-up kitchen window. Dark circles rimmed everyone's eyes after a night of rotating watch shifts. Isaiah spooned oatmeal with his left hand, his right tapping restlessly against the table. "The Southfield irrigation line needs fixing today," he announced, breaking the silence. "Those bastards cut it clean through. Crop will burn up by tomorrow if we don't get water flowing." Elijah looked up from his coffee. "I'll handle it." You should stay here. No. Isaiah's voice hardened. I need parts from the co-op. Couplings, sealant, new section of pipe. I can get those things, Elijah insisted. Isaiah pushed back from the table. I'm not hiding in my own community. They already think we're scared. It's not about fear, Elijah said. It's strategy. It's my farm, too. Isaiah's eyes flashed. My name's on those deeds, same as yours. I'm going. Naomi watched the brothers, sensing this was about more than pipes and parts. It was about dignity. I'll drive you both, she offered. Safety in numbers. 40 minutes later, they pulled into Gable's Farm Co-op. The lot was half filled with dusty trucks, and farmers loaded supplies while pretending not to notice the boons. Inside, Isaiah grabbed a shopping cart and headed for plumbing supplies, while Elijah checked the bulletin board for any public notices about water restrictions. Isaiah found the couplings he needed and was examining pipe sections when shadows fell across him. 3 men wearing leather vests with faded patches blocked the aisle. Well, look who decided to shop today, the tallest one said. One of the famous Boone brothers. Isaiah kept his focus on the pipe fitting in his hand. Just getting supplies. Here you used to be military, another said, stepping closer. Don't look so tough to me. Just looks fat and old. Isaiah's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He tried to push his cart forward, but the men shifted to block him. Move, Isaiah said quietly. Make me, the tall one replied, shoving Isaiah's shoulder. The co-op had gone silent. Other customers pretended to study feed prices or examine tools, but everyone was watching. No one stepped forward. I'm just here for parts, Isaiah said, backing toward the loading door where pickup trucks were parked beside stacks of fertilizer. Your kind don't belong here anymore, the third man said, following. This is white man's country. Isaiah felt his pulse hammering in his temples. He knew what they wanted, for him to throw the first punch, create a scene, give Hensley reason to lock him up. He kept his hands deliberately at his sides, palms open. Nothing to say, tough guy? The tall one stepped closer. You deaf as well as stupid? Isaiah kept backing up until he felt the truck bed behind him. The men had him cornered between vehicles and fertilizer pallets. Still, he kept his hands visible. I'm leaving now, he said calmly. Not yet, the tall one smiled. It happened in a flash. One of them grabbed Isaiah's right hand and yanked it toward the pickup truck. The truck door slammed with crushing force, catching his fingers. Bone met metal with a sickening crunch. Isaiah's knees buckled as white-hot pain exploded through his hand. The door opened and slammed again. Blood spattered the dusty ground. Oops, the tall one said. Door accident. Isaiah clutched his mangled hand to his chest, fighting to stay conscious as blood soaked his shirt. Through waves of pain, he heard Elijah's voice calling his name. Elijah burst through the loading doors, took one look at Isaiah's hand, and lunged toward the men. Isaiah grabbed his brother with his good hand. No, Isaiah gasped. That's what they want. The attackers smirked, waiting for Elijah to strike. Instead, he wrapped an arm around his twin, supporting him. We need a doctor, Elijah announced to the silent observers. Anyone going to help? Or are you all just part of this now? No one moved. No one spoke. Naomi rushed in, her face paling at the sight of her uncle's hand. She helped him to the truck, while Elijah threw money on the counter for their supplies. This isn't over, one attacker called after them. At the clinic, Dr. Wells examined the crushed fingers and split skin, his face grim. 3 broken bones. Possible nerve damage. You'll need surgery to save full function. Write it up, Naomi demanded. We need it documented as assault. Dr. Wells hesitated. I can record crush injury. Mechanism. Uncertain. You know damn well what happened, Naomi said. The doctor looked away. I have other patients who need this clinic. Other families who count on me. His meaning was clear. Even the medical system was bowing to pressure. That night, Isaiah sat on the porch, his bandaged hand throbbing with each heartbeat. He stared into the darkness, tears streaming silently down his weathered face. He didn't wipe them away. There was no hiding shame in the dark. They took my hand, he whispered. How am I supposed to work my own land? The crunch of tires on gravel announced Tessa's arrival. She climbed out of her car, clutching a folder, her face animated with urgency. I found something, she called, hurrying up the steps. Something big. They've been doing this for years, Tessa said, spreading photocopies across the card table. The porch light cast long shadows as she arranged foreclosure notices and old fire reports in neat rows. These aren't random incidents. Elijah gently unwrapped the blood-spotted bandage from Isaiah's hand, revealing swollen purple fingers. Isaiah winced, but kept his eyes on the documents. Easy, Elijah murmured, applying fresh ointment. Don't move. From her rocking chair, Loretta leaned forward, glasses perched on her nose. Whose names are we seeing? Rooker's. Tessa tapped a yellowed newspaper clipping. But he's smart. He works through shell companies, Riverfront Holdings, Meadow Valley Partners, Eastern Transport Solutions. Different names, same people. Naomi stood at the edge of the table, her face hardening as she studied the pattern. All black landowners? Every single one, Tessa confirmed. The Washingtons lost their 50 acres 3 years ago. Fire destroyed their hay storage. Insurance denied the claim. Then tax problems. The Johnsons before that. Elderly couple, mysterious equipment damage, followed by threatening letters. Sold for 30 cents on the dollar. Isaiah hissed as Elijah wrapped fresh gauze around his crushed fingers. Sorry, Elijah said quietly. Not you, Isaiah replied. Them. We've known these families all our lives. Nobody connected the dots? Tessa shook her head. Each case looked isolated. Different problems, different years. But look here. She pointed to a signature on a response report. Sheriff Hensley, first responder on the Washington fire. And here, witness statement on the Johnson property damage. And here, present during the Miller foreclosure auction. Son of a bitch, Loretta whispered, her rocker stopping mid-motion. Naomi disappeared inside, returning moments later with county planning maps. She spread them beside Tessa's documents. Look, she said, tracing lines with her finger. Our land sits right between the old rail spur and the county access road. It's the missing piece of a perfect corridor. If Rooker controls this stretch, he has uninterrupted transport from the interstate to those unmarked storage yards by the river. What storage yards? Elijah asked, securing the bandage on Isaiah's hand. The ones that shouldn't exist, Naomi explained. I checked permit records. They're licensed for agricultural supply, but there's heavy truck traffic at night. No inspections in 3 years. Tessa nodded eagerly. And look at this. Chemical spill complaint filed last May, mysteriously dropped. Water testing scheduled, then canceled. It's not just our farm they want, Elijah said quietly. They need our silence. Isaiah flexed his good hand into a fist. They're not getting either. For the first time in days, something like hope flickered across their faces. The enemy now had a shape. Not just angry bikers, but a system of corruption with documented patterns. What's our next move? Loretta asked. I contact my editor, Tessa said. This is bigger than a local story now. We need state-level coverage. I can file environmental inspection requests, Naomi added. Flag those storage facilities for review. Once it's in the system, Hensley can't make it disappear. Elijah stood, stretching his back. We need hard evidence of what's moving through that corridor. Photos, video, shipping manifests. And we need to keep everyone safe while we get it, Isaiah added, looking at his bandaged hand. They worked until nearly 4 in the morning, organizing documents, making copies, sending encrypted emails. Security measures were tightened. Barn doors reinforced. Motion sensors positioned at key points. Watches scheduled in overlapping shifts. The first hint of pre-dawn gray touched the eastern sky when they heard it. The faint crunch of footsteps approaching the house. Not the roar of motorcycles or multiple boots, but the cautious steps of someone trying not to be noticed. Elijah motioned for silence, easing toward the window. Isaiah, despite his injury, positioned himself by the door. Loretta and Naomi moved deeper into the house. A figure emerged from the shadows, one of Rex's men, but alone. His face was badly bruised, one eye swollen shut. He stood in the yard, hands visible, looking nervously over his shoulder. "Please," he called in a harsh whisper. "I need to talk to you. Rex is planning something worse." Much worse. At first light, Elijah led the nervous biker to the machine shed, where tools hung in neat rows, and the smell of oil and metal filled the air. The man's hands trembled as he sat on an upturned crate, glancing toward the door every few seconds, like a cornered animal. "I'm Milo Kress," he said, wincing as he touched the bruise darkening his jaw. "Rex did this when I questioned the plan." Elijah kept his distance, leaning against the workbench. "Why come to us?" "Because they'll kill me either way now." Milo's voice cracked. "I'm already marked after getting caught here. Rex thinks I talked too much." Isaiah stood near the door, arms crossed over his chest. Naomi positioned her tablet discreetly to record, while Tessa kept her notebook ready. "Tell us everything," Elijah said. "Start with Rooker." Milo nodded, swallowing hard. "Rooker hired Rex about 8 months ago. Not directly, through some lawyer. Needed muscle to clear properties for his corridor project." He looked down at his hands. At first it was just intimidation. Scary visits, property damage. But then what? Isaiah pressed. Then people weren't selling fast enough. Rooker got impatient. Milo's eyes darted around the shed. The fires started. The accidents. Rex loved it. Said fear was more reliable than money. Naomi leaned forward. "What's actually happening at those storage facilities? Fuel tanks, chemical drums, stuff that needs permits they don't have. They're storing industrial waste, too, from companies that don't want to pay disposal fees." Milo's words tumbled out faster now. "The old feed mill on County Road 16 is the staging area. Trucks come through on Tuesdays and Fridays between midnight and 4 a.m. Tessa scribbled furiously. "Names. I need names." Milo gave them everything. Companies, drivers, the foreman who took cash payments, the county inspector who looked the other way. "Rooker has this map," Milo continued. "Shows how your property connects everything. If he gets this land, the whole operation stays hidden from the main roads." While Milo talked, Elijah watched his body language. The fear was genuine. The details were too specific to be invented. "Why should we trust you?" Isaiah asked bluntly. Milo looked up, his swollen eye barely open. "Because Rex told us to burn your house down tomorrow night with everyone inside. Said to make it look like an electrical fire." His voice dropped to a whisper. I've done bad things, but I never signed up for murder. The room went silent, except for the distant call of morning birds. Tessa pulled Elijah aside. My editor wants one more piece of corroboration. Photos of the storage site, shipping manifests, anything physical. Then we run the full story. I've got a contact in the State Environmental Protection Office, Naomi added. She's interested in the illegal dumping angle. This could trigger an emergency inspection. For the first time in days, Elijah felt the weight lift slightly from his shoulders. The truth was taking shape, not just as family knowledge, but as evidence that could withstand public scrutiny. By evening, something remarkable happened. 3 neighbors arrived separately with covered dishes and whispered support. Mr. Whalen, who owned the adjacent dairy farm, brought chicken casserole and quietly offered, I saw those bikers tampering with your irrigation lines last Tuesday. I'll testify if needed. Mrs. Henderson from the church brought cornbread and admitted, my nephew works at the county records office. Says files about your property keep disappearing. Even old man Jenkins, who rarely spoke to anyone, left a ham on the porch with a note. Saw strange trucks by your Northfield last month. Got pictures. The wall of silence was finally cracking. After the visitors left, the family gathered in the kitchen. The table overflowed with food and new information. Tessa had confirmation on 6 of Milo's claims through public records. Naomi's state contact had scheduled a call for the next morning. We might actually win this, Isaiah said, the hope in his voice almost fragile. Elijah allowed himself a cautious smile. One more day of gathering evidence. Then we move. They agreed Milo would meet Tessa at a motel 30 miles away, far enough from Rex's territory to sign a formal statement and review photos of the storage facility. Naomi would drive to the county office to retrieve land survey records that could prove the property boundaries had been tampered with. As night fell, Elijah stepped onto the porch, looking across the darkened fields. For the first time since the threats began, he imagined sunlight breaking through clouds, truth overpowering fear, justice actually arriving. The thought felt dangerous, almost too precious to hold. His phone buzzed at 10:43 p.m. A text from Tessa. Milo never showed. Called the motel. No sign of him. Elijah immediately dialed Naomi's number. It rang without answer. He tried again. Straight to voicemail. Isaiah came to the door, saw his brother's face, and knew instantly. What's happened? Milo's missing, and Naomi isn't answering her phone. The headlights cut through darkness like angry eyes as Tessa's car limped into the boneyard. She stumbled out, clutching her left arm against her body. Blood trickled from her hairline. Her glasses hung broken from one ear. They ran me off County Road 16, she gasped as Elijah rushed to help her. Black truck. No plates. Hit me twice. Isaiah appeared from the barn, saw her condition, and froze. Where's Milo? Never showed. Tessa winced as Loretta pressed a clean dish towel to her forehead. I called the motel. The clerk said someone matching his description checked in, then left with 2 men. He didn't look happy about it. Elijah steadied Tessa into a kitchen chair. And Naomi? Have you heard from her? The question hung in the air. Tessa's silence was the worst answer. Isaiah's face darkened like a thundercloud. The restraint he'd been clinging to for days shattered. He grabbed a wrench from the counter and slammed it into the wall, punching a hole through drywall. They've got her! His voice cracked with rage. I told you we should have hit them first. Before Elijah could respond, all their phones buzzed at once. A video message from an unknown number. The screen showed Naomi tied to a metal chair inside what looked like an industrial building. Her lip was split, but her eyes burned with defiance. Rex Varlow paced around her, tapping a hunting knife against his palm. "Morning, gentlemen." His voice dripped with satisfaction. "As you can see, we've got ourselves a family reunion. Pretty girl you raised, Elijah. Strong, too. Hasn't cried once." He grabbed Naomi's hair, yanking her head back. She didn't make a sound. "Here's how this works. By sunrise, you bring signed transfer papers for that worthless dirt you call a farm to the old Walker feed mill. Just you two. No cops, no reporters." He pressed the knife tip against Naomi's cheek without breaking skin. "Or I start mailing her back to you in pieces." The video ended. Loretta clutched the kitchen counter, her knuckles white. "We need to call—" "No one," Elijah cut in. "Hensley's with them. State police wouldn't get here in time." Isaiah was already pulling equipment from cabinets, flashlights, wire cutters, heavy work gloves. His wounded hand seemed forgotten. "It's a trap," Tessa warned. "They're luring you away from the farm." "We know," Elijah said, checking his old field watch. "But we have no choice." He moved with frightening calm, collecting items from around the house. A long screwdriver, zip ties, rope, and a worn leather case that hadn't been opened in years. Inside were the twins' service knives, still gleaming, still deadly. Within 20 minutes, they had loaded Elijah's truck with everything they might need. Loretta hugged each brother fiercely. "Bring her home," she whispered. "And you come home, too." The abandoned Walker feed mill loomed against the night sky like a rotting castle. 3 motorcycles and a black truck sat near the loading dock. The brothers parked half a mile away, approaching on foot through the tree line. 4 outside. Probably more inside, Elijah whispered, studying the building's outline. They moved like shadows, using hand signals from another life. Isaiah took the rear entrance, while Elijah slipped through a broken window. Inside, grain dust hung in the air, coating everything in ghostly powder. The brothers navigated by memory and instinct, avoiding loose boards and metal debris. On the 3rd floor, they heard voices. Rex and 2 others, their shadows stretching across the walls. Naomi's chair was positioned beneath a hanging light, making her the perfect target in the darkness. Isaiah made the first move, hitting the circuit breaker. The building plunged into darkness, except for the bikers' flashlight beams, which now made them visible targets instead. The twins attacked with terrible precision. Elijah took the north catwalk, luring one man toward a weakened section of flooring. When the biker stepped forward, the boards gave way. His scream ended with a sickening thud 2 floors down. Isaiah confronted a giant enforcer wielding a chain. The first swing caught Isaiah across the ribs, tearing fabric and skin. He didn't falter. Instead of backing away, he charged forward, inside the chain's arc, driving his shoulder into the man's sternum. They crashed into an old conveyor belt, trading brutal blows in the darkness. Rex moved toward Naomi, knife raised. "Call them off, or she dies." Elijah dropped from a crossbeam, landing behind Rex. The fight was savage. Rex slashing wildly, Elijah blocking with a piece of broken pipe. When Rex lunged, Elijah sidestepped and hooked Rex's ankle with the pipe, sending him sprawling. Meanwhile, Naomi had worked one hand free. When another biker approached, she flung a handful of caustic lime dust from a nearby pallet into his face. He screamed, clawing at his eyes. Isaiah finished his opponent with a devastating uppercut, then staggered toward his niece, blood soaking his shirt. Together, The brothers united their paths to Naomi, creating a defensive perimeter around her as they cut her free. Morning light crawled across the county jail's stained concrete floor. Elijah sat on a thin mattress, his hands still aching from the fight at Walker Mill. 2 cells down, separated by empty space, Isaiah leaned against cold bars, his bandaged ribs making each breath a careful calculation. The booking process had been humiliating. Fingerprints, mugshots, and Hensley's smirking satisfaction as charges were read aloud. Kidnapping, aggravated assault, arson, each one designed to keep them locked up long enough for the emergency land seizure to proceed unopposed. Through the small visitor's window, Elijah could see Naomi pacing in the waiting area, her face swollen on one side, eyes burning with barely controlled rage. An ambulance had taken Loretta for stitches just as dawn broke over the farm. The image of their sister being loaded into the vehicle, blood crusted in her gray hair, had nearly broken Isaiah's restraint when Hensley shoved him into the patrol car. "You got what you wanted," Elijah told the deputy, who brought weak coffee in a paper cup. "Farm's wide open now." The deputy avoided his gaze. "Just doing my job." "So were the guards at every prison camp in history," Elijah replied quietly. In the next cell block, Isaiah pressed his forehead against cold metal, replaying their failure. They had saved Naomi, but lost everything else. The raiders had been thorough. Livestock slaughtered, equipment sabotaged, barns partially burned, and every box of family documents torched. Worse than property damage was the image of Loretta on the kitchen floor, having fought back against men half her age. "Should have seen it coming," Isaiah muttered to himself. "Fools move." A guard walked past. "Talking to yourself already? You'll be here a while." Isaiah lifted his gaze. "How much did Rooker pay you to look away last night?" The guard's face hardened. "Keep it up. See what happens." In the waiting area, Naomi pressed her palms against the cool glass, watching her father and uncle isolated in separate cells. The night's brutality was written across her body. Bruised wrists from restraints, scrapes from the feed mill rescue, exhaustion hollowing her eyes. But physical pain was nothing compared to what was happening now. "They're pushing for an emergency hearing at 2, Tessa said, limping toward her with 2 coffee cups. "County Commission special session. They'll cite public safety concerns, imminent danger, environmental hazards, all because of the damage they caused themselves. They can't get away with this," Naomi said, her voice cracking. "Not after what they did to Aunt Loretta." "Focus," Tessa said firmly. "We fight smart, or we lose everything. Where's that state investigator's card I gave you?" Naomi fumbled through her purse with shaking hands. "Torres, Environmental Enforcement Division." "Call her now. Then we need to find whatever backup evidence might have survived." The hospital waiting room smelled of antiseptic and old magazines. Loretta sat with bandages across her forehead and 3 stitches closing a gash above her left eye. When Naomi entered, her aunt straightened despite obvious pain. "They took everything," Loretta said before Naomi could speak. "But not everything." Naomi sat beside her. "What do you mean?" "Your father doesn't trust paper," Loretta said. "Never has. Last Christmas, he borrowed my old files for 3 days. Said he was organizing them." Understanding dawned on Naomi's face. "He made copies?" "Digital ones. Check his email cloud. And that old laptop he keeps in the tool cabinet. He pretends he's too old-fashioned for technology, but that man backs up everything." Naomi's fingers flew across her phone screen, checking folders and backups. "There's more. My phone. The one Hensley took after the first attack. It was set to autosync to my work account. Hope flickered as thumbnails populated her screen. Partial video of Milo's confession, property records, timestamps of threats. Not complete, but enough to force questions that couldn't be buried. Tessa's call with her editor went straight to the point. Send everything now. Every document. Every connection we've established. Mail physical copies to Torres at the state office and email the rest. If they shut us down locally, this has to exist somewhere else. By noon, Torres had received enough to justify preliminary interest. By 1, Naomi had compiled a flash drive containing everything they'd salvaged: Elijah's digital archives, her auto-synced confession fragments, Tessa's research, and county planning maps showing the illegal storage corridor. The courthouse steps were crowded with Rooker's people when Naomi arrived for the emergency hearing. Men in work clothes stood alongside officials in pressed shirts, all pretending this was routine business. Through the window, she could see bulldozers already positioned at the farm's edge, waiting for the legal paperwork. Rooker himself stood near the entrance, polished and confident, checking his watch as if this were merely an inconvenient delay in his schedule. Sheriff Hensley directed deputies to maintain order, while eyeing Naomi with practiced indifference. She clutched the flash drive in her palm, its edges digging into her skin. Inside that small piece of plastic and metal lay the truth about years of corruption, intimidation, and theft. Evidence that could expose not just last night's attack, but the entire system that had allowed it. Taking a deep breath, Naomi walked up the courthouse steps, past Rooker's smirking face, past Hensley's warning glare, and into the hearing room where her family's future would be decided. The county courtroom hummed with quiet conversation as Judge Helen Mercer reviewed the emergency petition. Rooker sat at the front table, his posture relaxed, hands folded neatly on polished wood. He wore a crisp blue suit and a concerned expression that might have fooled anyone who didn't know better. "Your Honor," Rooker said, his voice measured and reasonable, "this is simply a matter of public safety. The property has become hazardous. Multiple violent incidents, destruction of structures, and now criminal charges against the owners." He gestured to Sheriff Hensley, who stood near the bailiff's station in full uniform, badge gleaming under fluorescent lights. "The sheriff can confirm the deteriorating conditions," Rooker continued. "As a responsible business leader and neighbor, I'm merely offering temporary management until matters stabilize." Judge Mercer peered over her reading glasses. "And the timing of this emergency petition has nothing to do with your prior offers to purchase the property?" Before Rooker could answer, the courtroom doors swung open. Naomi Boone entered, accompanied by a sharp-eyed woman carrying a leather briefcase. "Your Honor," the woman announced, "I'm Rebecca Klein, legal aid counsel representing the Boone family interests. We have urgent evidence directly relevant to these proceedings." Sheriff Hensley stepped forward. "Judge, this is irregular. The defendants are in custody and—" "The defendants are my father and uncle," Naomi interrupted, her voice steady despite her bruised face. "And Ms. Klein represents our property interests, which are separate from any criminal proceedings." Judge Mercer nodded. "I'll hear it." Klein approached the bench with a flash drive and a folder of documents. "Your Honor, we submit evidence of coordinated harassment, falsified reports, and environmental violations directly connected to Mr. Rooker's development plans." She plugged the drive into the courtroom's evidence system. The screen flickered to life, showing Milo's bloodied face as he detailed the connection between Rooker's companies and Rex's gang. Though the footage was fragmentary, his words were clear. Rooker pays Rex to scare people off land he wants. Storage already running. Chemicals that ain't permitted. Rooker's face hardened. This is preposterous. Edited footage from some criminal trying to avoid charges. Klein continued methodically, displaying permit discrepancies, property records showing Rooker's shell companies, and satellite images of unauthorized construction at adjacent sites. Furthermore, Klein said, we have evidence that Sheriff Hensley repeatedly lost or mishandled reports filed by the Boone family regarding threats and property damage. All eyes turned to Hensley, whose hand now rested on his belt near his weapon. Judge Mercer studied the documents, her expression grave. I'm pausing these proceedings pending further investigation. This petition is held in abeyance until... The courtroom doors opened again. A woman in a crisp blazer entered, flanked by two men in windbreakers with environmental protection emblazoned across the back. Your Honor, I'm State Environmental Investigator Lena Torres. We have preliminary warrants for inspection of storage facilities identified in documents recently submitted to our office. She glanced at Naomi. Documents that appear to match what you're reviewing now. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Rooker's attorney whispered urgently in his ear. Sheriff Hensley's face drained of color as Torres approached him directly. Sheriff, we'll need to discuss why multiple reports of chemical storage and disposal violations were filed with your office, but never reached state agencies, Torres said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Particularly those connected to properties recently acquired by Rooker Development. Outside the courthouse, news traveled fast. Phones buzzed with text messages and social media updates. A regional radio reporter had caught wind of the story and was broadcasting live from the courthouse steps. People who had hurried past the Boones for weeks now slowed to listen, to watch the official vehicles and camera crews gathering. In light of these developments, Judge Mercer announced, I'm ordering the temporary release of Elijah and Isaiah Boone, pending review of all evidence. The procedural irregularities are too significant to ignore. An hour later, Elijah and Isaiah walked out into the harsh afternoon sunlight, squinting after hours in dim cells. They stood shoulder to shoulder on the courthouse steps, their faces bruised but unbowed. Naomi rushed to embrace them, relief flooding her features. We stopped the seizure. Torres is already at the storage sites with warrants. Where's Rex? Isaiah asked immediately, scanning the parking lot. Tessa approached, phone in hand. That's the problem. He and his core crew cleared out of their usual spots. Nobody's seen them since dawn. As sunset approached, they piled into Tessa's car for the drive back to what remained of their farm. Elijah sat silently in the passenger seat, calculating next steps, assessing what weapons and tools might have survived the destruction. As they crested the final hill on the county road, Elijah leaned forward, his body tensing. Against the darkening sky, a plume of smoke rose from the direction of Boone land. He's not done, Elijah said quietly. Rex is making his last stand. That same dusk, the Boone family pulled onto their property to find flames dancing in the outer pasture, deliberately set to draw attention. The fire wasn't large, just big enough to be visible from the road and demand immediate response. It's bait, Elijah said, his voice low and certain. Rex wants to pull us to that side, thin us out. Tessa grabbed her camera from the back seat, filming the scene as evidence. Her hands were steady despite the danger. I'm documenting everything. This goes live the moment I hit send. Behind them, a pickup truck rumbled up the drive, then another. Word had spread after the courthouse confrontation. Neighbors who'd kept their distance for weeks now approached cautiously. The Wilsons from 2 miles east, the Tanner brothers, old Pastor Green, and his grandson. "Heard you boys might need some eyes tonight," Pastor Green called out. His face was grim beneath his cap. "Not here to fight, but I'll bear witness to the truth." Isaiah nodded at the small gathering. "Courthouse really shook things up, huh?" When those environmental folks showed up, people started talking. Mrs. Wilson said, "Rooker's been bullying folks all over the county." Elijah wasted no time. He gathered everyone in what remained of the barn, standing beneath the charred beams while the last light faded from the sky. "Rex and what's left of his crew will hit us tonight before the warrants catch up to them," he said, his voice calm despite the tension in his shoulders. "They know they're done after this, so they'll come hard." He unrolled a hand-drawn map of the property on a feed barrel. "We don't need anyone fighting our battles. What we need are witnesses who can't be intimidated and can't be killed without consequences." Isaiah pointed to the approach routes. "We're setting defensive positions only. Nobody shoots first. Nobody dies tonight if we can help it." For the next hour, they worked with practiced efficiency. Elijah opened irrigation valves to flood the eastern approach, turning firm ground into sucking mud that would trap motorcycles. Isaiah positioned the combine at an angle across the main entrance, creating a bottleneck that forced anyone entering to slow down and funnel through a narrow gap. Naomi worked her laptop from the back of her car, uploading files to news outlets, social media, and government servers. "I'm putting everything we have online right now," she called out. "Burning this place won't bury the evidence anymore." Tessa filmed methodically, capturing each preparation. "I've got my editor on standby. The minute anything happens, this goes live across 3 counties." Loretta, her face still bruised and one arm bandaged, refused to leave. She sat at the kitchen table sorting through a small metal box she'd recovered from beneath a floorboard in the pantry. "They missed this," she said, as Elijah checked on her. She spread out yellowed receipts and handwritten letters. Grandfather's original purchase documentation, tax receipts going back to 1954, the complete chain of title. Elijah squeezed her shoulder gently. "You should be at the hospital." "This is my home, too," she replied, not looking up from her work. "I won't be driven from it." Isaiah taped his ribs tightly, wincing as he stretched the bandage across his torso. He flexed his damaged hand repeatedly, forcing the swollen fingers to close around a flashlight. "You sure you can do this?" Elijah asked quietly, watching his brother's pain. "Been hurting since Korea," Isaiah answered with a grim smile. "Grandfather said the same thing when he bought this land. Pain is temporary. The farm is forever." They positioned the volunteers at safe observation points: the ridge behind the house, the upper barn loft, the equipment shed with its clear view of the southern approach. Each had a radio, a camera, and strict instructions to stay hidden and document everything. "You're not here to help us fight," Elijah told them firmly. "You're here so the truth can't be buried again." As full darkness settled, they killed all the obvious lights, but positioned work lamps in strategic locations, ready to blind anyone approaching from the shadows. The brothers took their positions, Elijah near the northern fence line, Isaiah by the equipment shed, each with clear sight lines to support the other. The night grew quiet except for the soft crackle of the decoy fire, still burning in the distant field. Then, just after 10, they heard it. The low rumble of motorcycle engines approaching from multiple directions. The sound grew, separated into distinct groups, coming from the east, south, and main road. "They're here!" Isaiah's voice came through the radio. 3 groups, just like you figured. Headlights cut through the darkness as Rex's gang charged toward the property for what everyone knew would be their last stand. "Remember," Elijah said into his radio, his voice steady as the engines grew louder. "We defend. We survive. We win by being here tomorrow." The motorcycles accelerated, racing toward the farm from 3 directions at once. Night swallows Boone land as headlights slash through flooded rows. Rex's bikers surge in fast, expecting panic and chaos. Instead, their front wheels sink in the mud Elijah created hours earlier. "What the hell?" The lead rider's curse cuts through the darkness as his motorcycle lurches to a stop, rear wheel spinning uselessly, spraying thick mud into the air. Rex's voice rises above the revving engines. "Go around. Don't bunch up!" But the damage is done. 3 bikes bogged down in the saturated field Elijah had carefully flooded. The riders dismount, cursing and shoving each other in frustration. The others split up, racing toward alternative routes, exactly as Elijah had predicted. 2 riders gun their engines, aiming for the west entrance. The first slams into the combine Elijah positioned earlier. Metal crunches against metal as the rider flips over the handlebars, landing hard on packed dirt. The second bike swerves to avoid the wreck and plows straight into an irrigation trench, throwing its rider face first onto the ground. Isaiah watches from the shadow of the equipment shed as a massive enforcer, the one who'd crushed his hand at the co-op, dismounts from his bike and stalks forward, carrying a chain wrapped around his fist. "Come out, old man!" The enforcer swings the chain, smashing the shed's window. "Ain't so tough now, are you?" Isaiah steps into view, his damaged hand clenched despite the pain. "Been waiting for you," he says quietly. The enforcer charges, swinging the chain in a deadly arc. Isaiah ducks, the metal whistling past his ear. He grabs a shovel handle, driving it hard into the man's stomach. The enforcer staggers back but recovers quickly, landing a punch that sends Isaiah crashing into a rack of tools. Pain explodes across Isaiah's taped ribs. He gasps, struggling to breathe as the enforcer advances. Tools clatter to the ground around him, wrenches, hammers, pruning shears. Isaiah seizes a heavy pipe wrench, blocking the next swing of the chain. The shed catches fire. Whether from the enforcer's dropped lighter or sparks from metal striking metal, neither man knows. Flames lick up the wall, casting their struggle in harsh orange light. "You should have sold that worthless land," the enforcer snarls, swinging again. Isaiah catches the chain on his wrench, yanking hard. The enforcer stumbles forward. Isaiah drives his knee up, then slams the wrench down on the man's shoulder with a sickening crack. The enforcer howls but keeps coming, grabbing Isaiah by the throat. "Gonna break your neck, old man." Isaiah drops his weight suddenly, twisting to break the grip. He grabs a handful of dirt and flings it into the enforcer's eyes. When the man staggers back, blinded and cursing, Isaiah delivers a crushing blow with the wrench that drops him to the floor. "My land," Isaiah says, breathing hard, "ain't worthless." Across the farm, Elijah moves through the slaughter corridor of the old barn, listening. The narrow space forces anyone to approach in a straight line. No room to flank, nowhere to hide. The boards creak beneath him as he steps carefully, staying close to the wall. "I know you're in here, Boone." Rex's voice echoes in the confined space. "Nowhere left to run." "Never planned on running," Elijah replies, his voice calm. Rex lunges from the shadows, knife glinting in the dim light filtering through cracks in the wooden walls. Elijah sidesteps, using Rex's momentum to slam him into the wall. Rex recovers quickly, slashing with the knife in practiced moves. "Should have taken the money," Rex growls, feinting left, then striking right. Elijah blocks with his forearm, feeling the blade slice through his shirt. He counters with a short, precise strike to Rex's throat, forcing him back. In the narrow corridor, Rex's speed and knife work meet Elijah's steady control and disciplined positioning. "Money can't buy what I already own," Elijah says, never taking his eyes off Rex's blade. Outside, Naomi positions herself behind a tractor, radio in hand. She sees a biker approaching the barn's side entrance, trying to flank her father. She flips the switch on the work lights she mounted earlier, flooding the area with blinding brightness. The biker throws up his arm, momentarily blinded. Naomi sprays him directly in the face, with pepper spray as he passes. He screams, dropping his weapon and clawing at his eyes. "North gate clear," she reports into the radio. "One down." Tessa films everything from her elevated position in the hayloft, capturing the bikers' faces, their weapons, the coordinated attack. Her camera catches Rex's voice shouting orders as bikers scramble across the property. Inside the barn, Rex's knife slices Elijah's arm. Blood darkens his sleeve, but he doesn't flinch. He traps Rex's wrist against the wall, applies pressure to the nerves until the knife clatters to the floor. Rex headbutts him, breaking free. They grapple in the narrow space, each blow echoing through the old structure. Elijah drives his knee into Rex's side, then locks him in a chokehold born from years of military training. "It's over," Elijah says, increasing pressure as Rex struggles. Rex claws at Elijah's arms, his movements growing weaker. Just as his knees begin to buckle, he kicks backward, breaking free. He scrambles toward the rear chute, desperate to escape. Isaiah appears at the exit, blocking Rex's path. His shirt is torn, his face smudged with soot from the burning shed. "Going somewhere?" Isaiah asks, stepping forward. Rex looks between the brothers, trapped. He lunges for a pitchfork leaning against the wall. Isaiah kicks it away, and both brothers close in. Their movements are synchronized from decades of working side by side, anticipating each other's actions without words. Dawn broke over Boone land, not with the usual quiet of chirping birds and rustling leaves, but with the wail of ambulances, the flash of police lights, and the buzz of news helicopters overhead. The yard had become a sea of uniforms and cameras, all focused on the spectacle of Rex Varlow being dragged from the property. Rex's face was smeared with blood and dirt, his signature swagger replaced by raw terror as officers loaded him into the back of a county vehicle. Not Hensley's, but one from the neighboring jurisdiction. His wrists were cuffed behind his back, and he kept looking over his shoulder, as if expecting Rooker to somehow make this all disappear. "You can't do this," Rex shouted, his voice cracking. "I've got friends. I've got protection." But no protection came. The cameras caught everything, his pleas, his threats, his final pathetic attempts to bargain as the door slammed shut. Elijah and Isaiah stood on the porch, bandaged but upright. Isaiah's ribs were taped tight beneath his shirt, and Elijah's arm bore fresh stitches where Rex's knife had caught him. They watched in silence as their tormentor was reduced to just another criminal in custody. "It's really happening," Naomi said, her voice hushed with disbelief. Before the sun had fully risen, news spread through the emergency command post set up in their yard. Dale Rooker had been arrested at his office. State police had caught him attempting to shred documents when they arrived with warrants. The polished developer in his expensive suit was photographed being escorted through his own lobby, his face frozen in shock as employees watched. By noon, the sight that many thought impossible. Sheriff Boyd Hensley, still in uniform, being led out of the county building in handcuffs. The charges read like a textbook of corruption: evidence tampering, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and aiding criminal enterprise. The badge that had shielded so much wrong was removed before the cameras. "Never thought I'd live to see it," Loretta said, her face still bruised, but her eyes clear and satisfied. State environmental officials moved quickly, shutting down the illegal storage facilities that same day. Inspectors in hazmat suits documented leaking containers, falsified permits, and dangerous chemicals stored near water sources. The transport corridor that had made Boone land so valuable was sealed under emergency orders, with cleanup costs directed to Rooker's seized assets. The next morning brought the first of what would become a parade of visitors. Tom Wilkins, an elderly man who had lost his family land 3 years earlier after suspicious fires, arrived with his daughter. They had read Tessa's initial story online and wanted to reopen their case. "If you folks could stand your ground, maybe there's hope for the rest of us," he told the brothers, his weathered hands trembling as he showed them his old deed papers. By the end of the week, 8 more families had come forward, each with stories that echoed the Boones' ordeal. State investigators opened a dedicated line just for cases connected to Rooker's operations. Naomi worked the phones relentlessly, leveraging her agricultural connections. By Wednesday, she had secured a new produce contract through a statewide co-op that bypassed the local buyers who had abandoned them. "Triple the volume, better price point, and they're sending trucks next week," she announced, slapping the signed agreement on the kitchen table. The most surprising transformation came in waves of neighbors. First one truck arrived with lumber, then another with fencing supplies. A church group brought hot meals. Farmers who had looked away at the livestock auction now showed up with feed, tools, and strong backs. "We should have done something sooner," Mrs. Grayson from 2 properties over admitted, setting down a casserole dish. "Fear's a powerful thing, but it's no excuse." Tessa's full exposé ran on Sunday, 6 pages in the regional paper with online versions spreading nationwide. The headline read, "The Family That Broke the Silence: How the Boones Exposed Decades of Rural Corruption." The story named names, connected dots, and credited the twins directly for standing when others couldn't or wouldn't. Isaiah found Elijah studying the burned footprint of the old barn one evening, taking measurements with his good arm. "You know we don't have to rebuild exactly like it was," Isaiah said. "No," Elijah agreed. "We can make it better." The rebuilding began the following week. Trucks arrived at dawn carrying lumber, roofing, and volunteers. What had been destroyed by violence was now rising through community effort. The brothers worked alongside everyone else, directing, planning, lifting what they could despite their injuries. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.